variable cost, fixed cost. My background, I'm going to make the slides available, so if you don't need to take pictures, I'm going to give the deck to Margaret, and she's going to make that available so everybody can, go through it at their own leisure. You brushed on the economics of things. And what's really important, especially in Amazon, if you don't understand the drivers of your cost, bad things happen. And Greg mentioned a $60,000 bill that happens overnight. See if that flips over. Hang on a sec. Now, I'm not going to belabor it, but we had a $63,000 oops on the 31st. I think it was a Saturday. They were backing up logs from S3 to Glacier. That's fantastic. You're taking your cost structure from 2.3 cents a gig down to 0.4 of a penny. Fantastic. That data storage cost was $8.74. They took 100 kilobyte log files and they wrote them to Glacier. So who sees the first problem there? Glacier gives you 40 kilobytes of metadata and overhead. So now you're paying a 40% premium because you don't understand the mechanics of Glacier. Second problem, after your first million puts, it's 5 cents a thousand. So how much does it cost when you do 1.29 billion puts? Just under 64,000 bucks. So you need to understand and you need to educate yourself as to the underlying mechanics of the Amazon services that you're using, otherwise bad things happen. And we're making an appeal to Amazon, and hopefully they will show mercy on us and, give us some remediation on the bill there. But you need to shift almost to a manufacturing mindset and understand variability and ensure that your product is built right and really work with the underlying things. People don't think about network communication cost, region to region or intra-AZ, or moving a gigabyte in a European region is far more expensive than moving a gigabyte here around the United States. And those things add up at scale, and it really, really matters. So for the first time, and it's kind of was touched on by Greg, engineers and developers have a stake in determining whether your gross margin holds up or it collapses based upon how they develop. And you need to educate them and get them familiar with, the part of the system they're going to control. You need to drive for greater elasticity and make your systems, I like to say it as, make them as small as possible, make your architecture as small as possible, but no smaller. Stealing from Einstein when I say that. The operational costs and accountabilities now are in the dev team, not the finance manager or the project manager. And that really matters. And I spend a good portion of my time working with the engineering and development staff, educating them onto the resources they're using and the impact of how they use those resources. So my definition of FinOps, it's kind of the intersection of planning, architecture, operations, and accounting. And because those are the people I work with all day long. I kind of sit in the middle between those four groups. And to me, that's how FinOps has been growing up at Arity. We, the planning folks, they want to understand, it's planning, designing, measuring, and reporting, and that cycle just goes around and around and around. And probably the best way I heard that explained in one of the FinOps.org calls that happens every other Wednesday is somebody says a FinOps person is a full stack business person. And you really have to have, if you're a product-driven company, you need to understand the product and the product's direction and roadmap and where it's going and the customers it wishes to serve. What is the market like and the price points? Because now the developers have that heavy hand and accountability into gross margin based upon your design. So how many here think FinOps is just about cost optimization and just driving down your unit cost? I'm going to steal from Mike Fuller from Atlassian, who's one of the founders of FinOps.org, and this is his view that he presented at CloudEcon a couple weeks ago. And these are the elements that, and I think he did a great job of explaining it. We're teaching the engineers about debits and credits. We're teaching the finance folks about bits and bytes. And to give you a quick story, we had somebody spin up 19 servers putting in a Hadoop cluster. And our head of finance was like, I didn't sign off on anything, turn it off. And it's like, it doesn't work that way anymore. These guys can spin up whatever they want, whenever they want, and we hire smart, capable people, and we empower them, and they go off and, they do the right thing. And he was incensed that he was not part of the chain of command to let that turn on and let that expense go forward, because in the old world, that's the way it worked. I have a project, here's what it's gonna be. I need this many servers, this much disk, this much network capability, this kind of pipe for the internet, what have you. And then the finance people were involved before the first line of code was written, and that just doesn't work that way anymore. I've got some slides here, and this is directly from some of the FinOps Foundation materials that was presented at CloudyCon. And it kind of gives the overview. And the key thing is you're going to focus again on that triangle of speed, delivery, and cost, or as to say it, is good, fast, and cheap. What matters to you? You can do a lot of things in a, very, very quickly, very well, or very badly, as in the case of the folks who did our backup process for into Glacier. And Greg touched upon this. It's a practice. It's not a prescriptive process. What works for us at Arity is not going to be the same at Morningstar, is not going to be the same at your company. Everybody approaches their business a little bit differently, and you have to tailor your FinOps to support your organization's needs, both front office, middle office, back office, however you're set up. The collaboration, I can't stress that enough. I have to, as a FinOps, I've been given stern warnings. I can't be a cost accountant because then I've overstepped my bounds on the finance side. And I'm not an engineer or architect, then I've overstepped my bounds on the engineering side. So I've got to sit in that middle of the Venn diagram where that all overlaps. And you have to just be a value add to those teams and show how the practice can make them make better decisions and add more value to your company. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, is creating value for the markets you serve and the products you sell. The principles of the FinOps, I'm not going to read them to you, but I'm going to touch on a couple of them as we go through here. One of the key things that we did very early on at Arity is we developed a unit economic model. We measure how people drive. So our core model is built upon trips and connections. Connections create the trips, whether you're using our hardware or software, and trips are exactly what you think they are, a trip in your car from point A to point B. We express everything in cost per connection. How much are our AWS costs on a cost per connection basis? Then we disaggregate that. How much is the compute? How much is the storage? How much is the network? Then we take it a further level down and we go by stack. So we have our data flow, which is the front end for all the ingestion. We have the operational data stores in the middle, and then we have the data lake on the back end. So we have the cost per connection to operate data flow, cost per connection to operate the data lake. Then we take it a level below, and our data lake is Hadoop. So how much does it cost for Zookeeper, Ambari, the master nodes, edge nodes on a cost per connection basis? Because I want the developers to see that when they make a change, there is an economic impact. And we press them pretty hard if the cost per connection goes up. If it's a bug fix, that's cool. It's cost of doing business. If it's regulatory, GDPR, CCPA, for anybody who has to abide by those, then it is what it is. If you made a change and the cost went up and there's no benefit, you need to put together a good technical case as to why we don't want to roll that back. If you're laying the groundwork for future features, functions, and features and options and what have you, that's fantastic because you're part of a product's business plan. If you made a change because you thought it would be cool to put in this really nifty recursive routine that's 8 lines instead of some linear code that's 4 paragraphs long, we're going to have you back it out because you are responsible for margin, and if you drive up the cost per connection for no good reason, we're going to ask you to roll it back. Some of the capabilities, the thing I like is a strategy. You have chargebacks and showbacks. There's something called shameback, which I absolutely love. And if you are operating and your resources in production are not tagged, you get into that bottom line, which accountants would call a plug, which bridges the things you know to the bottom line. And then you get to explain to our finance director, Dan, who wants to sign off on everything, where you spent the money and why. So that's one of the things I use to get people to tag everything. And we're going to touch on tagging a little bit more. But building scorecards and having people, you can take the quadrant, elasticity and, against whatever cost. And we want people to make as elastic as architecture as possible, use what you need to use. And I'm preaching to the developers here because you guys know that. That's what you live and breathe. But we came from, big Allstate-owned data centers, and our initial run at the cloud was a lift and shift. And we're slowly tearing this monolithic application apart, and eventually will be containerized and doing things what I would say would be the right way and more appropriate for the cloud. So what are some of the things we're doing here? Because I know everybody wants to say, what are you guys at Arity doing actually to drive down the costs? And it's a lot more than buying our eyes and doing things like that. First thing, I can't stress this enough. Tag your resources. But before you tag your resources, sit down with the business, with the product teams, with finance, with accounting, with your DevOps crew. What business and operational questions do you need to answer? Throwing tags out there for the sake of having tags is a great way to lose the rest of what hair I have left. It really is something you need to put a lot of thought into it, a lot of tabletop exercises, and work it on paper and then implement it, and be ruthless SOBs about enforcing it. Because a good tagging policy lets you make good decisions, both operationally and otherwise. We have our node, we're tagged down to a node level. I can tell you what Hadoop node's misbehaving by looking at yesterday's numbers. And then I can have the guys go check it out. Maybe it's something that needs to be recycled, or there's some anomaly going on that nobody thought about. But you can pick it up, because to me, dollars and cents are a proxy for operational efficiency. And I can tell when something is not operating because of the variation in the financial side of things. Storage strategy. We're long tail heavy on storage. And from EBS down to Glacier Deep Archive, you're talking orders of magnitude for your storage costs and the difference. And challenge people. We have a team that has, 124 terabytes in an S3 bucket because they need it. They have to have it. It's got to be readily available. I need that millisecond response time. So 4 months ago, I put CloudWatch metrics on it. And when you come to the conversation armed with data, well, it's hard to argue with. They're like, we need this, we use this all the time. It's like, guys, I'll call it WARN, write once, read never. They had 100 and God knows how many terabytes of data that they've just been accumulating that have never been read by any application. It's like, guys, this is going to Glacier. And we're not going to do it in 100 kilobyte chunks. We're going to do it as big as Glacier will let us do it to get that put cost down. But challenge people on it. Use data. CloudWatch metrics are your friends. They do cost, especially as many as we use. And we've written some of our own custom ones, especially to monitor memory utilization, because that's not one you get off the shelf. Another piece with storage. So the straw man argument here is you ingest a terabyte on the first of the month, and it costs $100 to store that terabyte for a month. Just making up some numbers here. And you ingest a terabyte every month of the year. At the end of the year, you have 78 storage months of cost. So your time to live becomes a very important consideration. And this is irrespective of if you're Azure, GCP or AWS. And this all falls into FinOps and making people aware of these costs. Because on-prem, that stuff's on a 3 or a 5 year amortization cycle. The developers never see that stuff. But here, the difference between 12 months and 13 months, your cost factor goes from 78 to 91. 14 months, you're at 105, 120, then 136. If you're storing something for 5 years because it's regulatory, you're in the thousands as a multiplier for the lifetime cost to store that data. And you need to think of it that way. So if you can flush it fast, do it. If you have no reason to keep it, I mean, security is going to want to keep their log files for some period of time. We have regulatory considerations because we rate drivers in the Allstate MileWise program based upon how far they drive, and anything that touches anything in the regulatory space, we keep for a very long time. But those are things to think about that you never had to worry about before because you were in the fixed cost universe. This is one of my favorites, data footprint management. So when on your cell phone, when you use software, the latitude and longitude is 15 digits. And in case of the longitude, it's got the negative sign, so it's a total of 16, 17 if you count the decimal point. We asked, what benefit do I get from keeping that many digits? So we put the data scientists on it. When you move that last decimal place on that top row there, that goes out, that ends in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you're moving in angstroms. That's at an atomic level. We can't measure driving behavior that way. So we asked the data scientists, work through the process, run the data through our model, and back it down until you get to a point where it impacts the model's behavior. And we determined it's 7 digits. We can have 7 digits of GPS without any impact to anything we do. And that adds up there. It's got a multiplicative benefit. If it's coming off your phone, it's using your phone's battery. If it's coming off your phone, it's using your phone's data plan. Our ingestion can now handle more capacity because we've trimmed off, 8 digits off of that. Our processes run faster, our payloads are smaller, and if you take it all the way down the food chain to the back end of things, we're storing less data, but it's all significant. Same thing with speed. Speeds come off, I think, with 7 digits. We cut that down to 2 because it doesn't impact the model. But we did the testing, we did the analysis. They weren't just wild guesses to see what we could get away with. And things like that matter because we deal in billions of GPS points a day. We probably have scored over 100 billion miles in the last couple of years. And we grab GPS points every second. So it adds up very, very quickly. We had consultants come in and get us started in our cloud journey, and they put everything on Red Hat. It's kind of the old phrase for, again, those of us who've been around a little while, nobody ever got fired by using IBM. Well, when you put in Red Hat, it's safe, it's stable, it gets the job done. You're paying anywhere from 6 to 15 cents an EC2 hour for Red Hat. And that stuff adds up very, very quickly. When I took over the role, or I created the role back in March of 17, we were spending $52,000 a month in Red Hat Premium. Moving to Ubuntu has cut our bill dramatically. If you want Red Hat, you need a business case for it. If the vendor support only comes with Red Hat, that's a good enough business case. But if the developer or the architect wants to use it just because, no can do. You need to have a technical case to let us authorize you to put a new Red Hat in. Sir?
Sorry. I come back.
Oh, no, that's no problem. Please ask your question.
Okay, I just had this conversation today because, we have a satellite server, RHEL, and I can impact and make sure that my instances are patched. Or I can make them set up as SAP build clusters. I can't do that.
No, but so you've got a technical case that says it's the right thing to use. That's perfectly fine. We had people install Red Hat just because they were familiar and comfortable with it and had there were no differentiating factors in our use cases between Ubuntu, CentOS, Red Hat. So why spend the extra money if there's no need to, especially when you're at scale, because pennies.
But are you driving that use case? And you're saying, look, are you challenging them on, okay, what is your reason for,
Right, we put in as a matter of course that when you're in the architectural process and you're specifying all the components they're going to be, if somebody says Red Hat, we start asking, they have to present the why behind the ask. You just can't use it because I can spin it up, just because I can. Another thing, Red Hat bills by the hour, Ubuntu bills by the second. So if you're doing truly ephemeral loads, that matters because that adds up very, very quickly, again, especially if you're at scale. You had another question, sir?
Sorry, one last question.
Oh, please.
Is there a, please help me out of mind, is there an Ubuntu enterprise version that will support patching and those kind of requirements?
See, that's where I'd go to one of my technical guys and ask that question. I don't know enough to answer that question. But I know we cycle every EC2 at least once a month. That's a part of the enterprise security policy. And everything is patched and brought up as a matter of a monthly cycle. They do like week 1 of the month is non-prod, week 2 of the month is pre-prod, week 3 of the month is prod. You get a week of rest, and then it starts all over again.
But without engaging in a Bluetooth or with a enterprise capability, then how do you get those patches?
We have a central security service that prepares everything for us. So security is centrally managed in the Allstate enterprise. They go through all that, they push it down to us. We have to at least go through the process once a month to make sure that we're current. And that's part of our standard operating procedure.
Can I ask how many of your instances then are on a Bluetooth versus route?
Too many. It is 45% of the hours and 83% of the cost. I don't have an exact count, I just think in terms of the percentages. And we're running several thousand instances. So little things like this add up to be huge amounts of money. And then the developers, this is probably old hat for you guys, you know, move up to the generations as soon as possible. I pointed out the biggest generational change in the last round between the eyes. That's the biggest number I found. We still have people, I think of them as my kids. They don't turn out the lights when they leave the room. They've over-provisioned in the lower environments because, I don't know, that's what they decided to do. You know, use spot instances to do your testing of your machine learning models, or to train your machine learning models and do your testing. If a test, you know, spots don't get called away that often, and if you're running a test case, you restart. There's no harm, no foul. And as I mentioned earlier, understand the cost components for your AWS resources. Typically, developers who came from an on-prem world didn't worry about gets and puts other than throughput management, not a cost side of it. You know, moving data from point A to point B, the behaviors of all these services. Read, you know, spend a little time, read the book, read the manual pages in Amazon. Everything's very, very well documented, as you guys know. And make that a part of the process. We've added to our architectural review the cost component. And let me tell you, we're, as Katelyn's going to tell you, you know, we're in budgeting season now, just like everyone else. The people who got their stuff approved first for the 2020 budget came with not only the technical case, but the cost savings. And they worked it through. We helped them with the models and made sure the numbers were valid and they could stand up. And those are the folks who sailed through and getting their projects lined up for next year's queue. Some things, some resources. Again, I'm going to make this deck available so you don't have to copy it. The Finope Foundation, started by J.R. Stormont and Mike Fuller at Atlassian, and J.R.'s with Cloudability. It's a fantastic organization, like-minded folks. I think there's, on the every other week call, they've had several hundred people from many, many countries enjoy and get together and share, because this is a brand new world for all of us. CloudyCon was a couple of weeks ago. It was just a fabulously constructed event. I'm looking forward to next year's. There's 2 books. JR and Mike are putting out a book that'll be released in the spring. It'll be available through O'Reilly. And this is a book, I've got about 30 or 40 pages left to go, the Mastering AWS Cost Optimization. If you have Kindle Unlimited, it's free. It's a part of your subscription. Katelyn's holding it right there. Mine's in my backpack. It is a very, very good book, and I suggest that you get it. So I'm going to turn it over to Katelyn, and she's going to take us across the finish line. So thank you for your time.
Did you want to talk about the FinOps group?
Here.
Yeah.
If anybody's interested in looking to put together a FinOps group here in Chicago, I'm happy to help get that launched under the Chicago AWS meetup. I want to make a subgroup, and if anybody's interested, please contact me. In the slide deck, you'll have my LinkedIn and my personal email. It's mikerosenberg@hotmail.com. Give me a shout. I'm happy to meet with anybody, answer your questions, help you out with your situations at work. But if we can stand up our own community, I think that would be just a great thing for everyone. All right, thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Katelyn Decraene, and I am the Cloud Finance Manager here from Morningstar. I've been with Morningstar for 3.5 years, and I've have just been in this role for a little over, almost about a year now. Today I'm going to talk to you guys just a little bit about some of the best practices and governance processes that we've put in place here to kind of make sure that we're managing our costs and optimizing in the cloud. This is just kind of a quick agenda, give you guys a little background just about Morningstar, talk about our journey, then I'll go into more detail about our governance process, and then talk about a new thing that we just rolled out this year, which is the cost star rating, and any questions you guys have. So I'm sure most of you guys are familiar with Morningstar, but I just want to make sure that this is not the vegetarian food company Morningstar. We are an independent investment research company. We focus on using a lot of our core competencies in data and research to create products and solutions for various investors. So our public cloud journey, we started this really in early 2017, before cloud, and at that time, our on-prem footprint, we had 11 data centers globally and over 11,000 servers. And to kind of kick that off, we had a public cloud COE, Center of Excellence, and I was part of that. That's kind of how I got involved. Other members of that were just different representatives from areas of business, and together we kind of worked to put together what our program vision was going to be and then our strategy to kind of get there. So I'll share that with you guys. So essentially, our vision for the cloud program at Morningstar was to really leverage cloud technologies to allow Morningstar to own and operate minimum amount of infrastructure to make sure that we increase our speed to market, support quick entry into emerging markets, support maximum client uptime, and then make sure that we have an efficient and transparent cost structure to allow us to move nimbly into the future. So with our vision in place, this is kind of what we came up with, or some of the 4 key components of our cloud strategy to make sure that we get there. First thing, data center consolidations. So we wanted to make sure that we were offsetting costs by aligning any of our migrations to any times where a data center required a hardware refresh. The next component, building on the foundation. We wanted to make sure that we had a strong foundation in place to make sure that we can successfully adopt public cloud here at Morningstar. Third piece here, data first. So we wanted to make sure that our core data systems were available so that products could leverage those in the cloud. And then fourth piece here, cloud native. So that is just making sure that anything new that we build is really just leveraging all of the capabilities in cloud and that we're optimizing from the start. So just to give you guys a little update on where we've come since we started our journey. So far, well, at the end of this year, we'll have retired 3 data centers. We've already reduced our on-prem server count by 3,000. We have a full-time dedicated cloud services team, which I am now a part of, and we have over 600 accounts in AWS. To give you guys a little more detail around this, 120 of those are team accounts where they're actually creating, developing products. Then we have an additional about 480 accounts that are actually individual accounts that we give out to Morningstar employees, and this is really to just give them the opportunity to go into AWS, gain familiarity with the console before they kind of get in there. So next, I'm going to talk to you guys just a little bit about our financial governance process. One of the things that we did do a good job, I think, of is just recognizing that and being proactive about knowing there's a need for cost management in the cloud early on. That doesn't mean that we haven't had our challenges. So a couple of things that I just thought I'd highlight are areas that we're really working on. Cost awareness and continuous monitoring. I think teams have gotten better about just general awareness of costs. Now it's really making sure that understanding that in order to successfully adopt cloud and manage costs, that you have to, this is a continuous process, it doesn't just end. The next thing, adopting a cloud mindset. We're still over provisioning resources in the cloud. So remembering that we don't need to provision things based on what we think our future needs are and matching supply and demand. Third thing, we're really bad at estimating. We tend to overestimate what projects or initiatives are going to cost. Some people think this is a good thing, which are a good problem to have, but at the same time, it's also, opportunity of budget that we could have given to another initiative. And then the last piece, the fourth piece, is just budgeting and forecasting agility. As we just touched on, the budgeting process is going on right now, and we can't really just plan everything that we need. So we've had to make some adjustments to be able to, fund initiatives as they come up and really be agile like the cloud. So some of the just kind of key foundational things that we've established here that have really helped us, build a strong foundation, and I'll go into more details on this here in a second, is just we have a financial governance process for how we actually approve spend in the cloud. We're doing quarterly business reviews, cost champions, which is part of the FinOps kind of model, and then training and awareness. So going a little more into detail about our financial governance process, we took a new approach this year in 2019 where we budgeted and reforecasted for all the existing initiatives that were approved, and then we had a separate reserve pool that we had kind of set aside for funding, and we established a governance committee that meets on a monthly basis to kind of govern how that funding is divvied out for initiatives. In order for an initiative to be funded or for a team to work on something, they have to create a business case. This business case, they'll fill it out and then they'll submit it to myself and Tony, who's our Director of Cloud Services. He does a technical review, and then I do a financial review of this. My financial review really entails if the team is already active in the cloud, is their current spend optimized, or can they optimize further to find efficiencies and be able to fund this initiative through that? If they are not active, then it's making sure that that they're optimizing from the start. Some of the good things that I think have come from this business case template process is just, again, highlighting on some of these same points, just making sure that technologists and the teams are understanding the cost drivers and the associated ramp up. And the second biggest thing is just documenting assumptions, really making sure that we're getting better at this. But this is, I think, key to helping us with kind of understanding what our driver is behind over forecasting. Did we either really, overestimate what it actually costs, or is it more of a timeline thing or assumptions that we had kind of put in? So it's just been helpful, and again, one thing we're really working on. So once the business case goes through our check, the P&L lead will then pitch that at the next governance meeting, which we hold on a monthly basis. Again, so the key stakeholders that are involved in this are CFO, CIO, CTO, all of the P&L leads, and then tech leads. There may be more than one that roll up under specific P&L. And then they'll either get approved or there'll be follow-up actions. And we'll kind of, yep. It's in the hundreds of thousands.
1, 2, 3, 10.
About 5.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next big, I guess, foundational item that we started this a little bit last year, but we've done a good job of making sure that we're sticking with it, is quarterly business reviews that we hold with each of the P&Ls and all the tech teams under that P&L. Biggest things, again, here is just keeping open communication channels between finance, cloud services team, and the tech teams. It's a couple things that we highlight, looking at how actuals versus budget are trending to date, making sure that we talk about any big variances that we're seeing. Again, this is just going back to continuously keeping costs in mind. Other things that we'll do is if I pull some reports together, if there's anything that I see where just specific services or trends, try to highlight that to make sure that the teams expected that, it's in line with what they thought. And then the last piece of that is just giving any suggestions for optimization potential if we have.
How you tag?
What was that?
How you tag?
Tagging? Which just specifically with regards to?
From an operational perspective, all that has to get represented.
So we,
How is that happening?
so right now our account structure is all based on the team accounts. So I'm showing that back to teams at that level. We have some tagging in place and we have a standard, but that hasn't been fully enforced yet. So a lot of this is just at the team level, and in order to get more granularity on the initiative that they're working on, that's where we'll get that with tagging. But right now I'm surfacing this level back by team and their account. So each team has 2 accounts, 1 prod, 1 non-prod account. Last 2 kind of big foundational items I'm going to touch on. Cost champions. Again, this kind of goes with adopting a FinOps operating model. We did a little POC with 2 of our tech teams. So this is still in its kind of infancy, and we're working on adopting that. And really the key things we've been focusing on here is getting the FAs that support the P&Ls and kind of encouraging and collaboration between them and the technologists to make sure that there's good knowledge sharing between those 2. And then the last piece here, just cost optimization is part of the AWS architecture framework, cost pillars. And so we have an existing architecture office and architecture champions, and we're trying to kind of make sure that we somehow incorporate that into the processes that are existing today here at Morningstar. Last piece, training and awareness. Don't underestimate this. We have Tech Tuesdays, so on Tuesdays of the month, around lunchtime, we will do just kind of sign-up sessions to just do knowledge sharing. And I did 1 session during one of these to just kind of go over the basic cost optimization pillars for AWS. Next month, our bill went down $12K. So just don't underestimate little bits of training here and there and that knowledge. So with our foundation, our governance process in place, and it's kind of a strong foundation there, we've really been able to kind of shift gears and really focus on driving cost optimization. One of the biggest things here and challenges is just removing the stigma around cost optimization. A lot of times people hear cost optimization and they think cost cutting, and so it's trying to change that mindset and realizing that this is more just about opportunity and the value of every single dollar that we're putting in the cloud versus, trying to save, cut costs somewhere. A couple things that we're doing this year to really drive the optimization. So we've set targets. We set targets at the team level, and we are 82% to that goal to date. We also had an RI coverage target, so we want to get to 60% across the company. We've met that goal, so now we are setting the bar higher, and we want to meet 70% by the end of the year. Training and awareness, again, just keep continuing this. And then the last part, which I'm going to go into more detail here and that we're really excited about, is the cost star rating. All right, so cost star rating, what is it? There's a lot of metrics out there. We needed to find a way to be able to surface these and to give teams just basically an understanding of, in a way to benchmark, score them on how well they are actually optimizing in the cloud. So that's kind of the whole concept behind the cost star rating. This snippet up here is something that is incorporated into a weekly product scorecard that goes out to teams that was already existing. So we've added that now in there. And then our rating it's a 5-star scale rating. So if you get a 5-star, you're doing really well. If you have 3, you're doing okay. 1, there's maybe some area for improvement. Just to give a little more clarity behind the product scorecard, this is not to be mixed up with any of our Morningstar ratings. This is just internally used, and it is generated and calculated by Brinko, which is cybersecurity risk management. essentially what this was just a way for us to be able to measure security, DR, and operational readiness of our products and kind of score teams. So we've incorporated this as part of that. And again, like I said, sent to teams on a weekly basis. This is an example on the side just so you guys see what a team would get. So methodology behind this, we made sure that we had a good working group with stakeholders that represented different areas of the business to make sure that the methodology that we came up with was actually reasonable and something we could apply across all teams. A lot of this is really based on research and resources of AWS best practices, one of which is Trusted Advisor. For those of you who aren't familiar with Trusted Advisor, this is just kind of a cloud or an AWS native tool, basically gives recommendations and best practices on to improve performance, reliability, security, and then cost. On the left-hand side, you'll see these are just an example of all the checks that are done through Trusted Advisor, just for reference. So the actual methodology, how do we go about determining how these ratings and how teams are scored? First thing that we did was we grouped all of our AWS services into opportunity tiers. So basically what we wanted to do is identify which services we felt we could get the most optimization potential out of. Tier 1, EC2, and UBS and RDS, some of the biggest, I guess, drivers in terms of cost on our bill. So those were tier 1 because we felt like there was a lot, those were good areas to tackle, and there was a lot of opportunity. So once we had those identified, the next thing that we did was we established metrics to be able to identify any resources that we could potentially optimize, and we would assign a severity to them. So I gave an example here, and which could be customized, but if there was an EC2 instance where the average CPU is less than, let's say, 5% per week, and the maximum CPU is less than 20% in a week, I'll go into more detail on it in a second, but essentially that would be something we'd think that you could optimize more, and we would just kind of assign a severity, critical, medium, high, or low, based on the different thresholds that we're using. Then the overall rating is actually determined based on the number of tickets or issues, optimization potential that we identified, and then the severity of those issues. So an example, to put this into context, a team would get a 1-star if, let's say, they had at least, we determined, 1 or 2 critical severity tickets or issues, or if they had more than, let's say, 10 high severity tickets. So this is just kind of the basic methodology behind the rating. As I said, this is still in its infancy. We just rolled this out at the end of July. We're kind of doing a phased approach. So the first phase is where we're at right now. And again, like I said, this is really focusing on EC2, EBS, and RDS utilization. Phase 2, we're hoping to kick off soon, and that's where we're going to maybe look at targeting RI coverage, getting in some methodology, metrics around budget versus actuals, kind of scoring teams on that, and then tagging. Really want to make sure that we're getting good coverage and tagging all of our resources based on the standards that we've identified here at Morningstar. The toolkit. So how do we get all this information? We have an in-house scanning engine and a cloud services API that we use. Trusted Advisor right now is our data source. We want to be able to leverage other data sources in the future. This is just the one we're using at the moment. We use Jira to track our issues. Essentially, that's just creating tickets for any of those optimization checks that our scanner identifies. Brinka then takes that, does the actual rating calculation, and then also is what we use to leverage and kind of surface this information through the product scorecards. So breaking it down, and essentially we have our cost scanner that plugs into Trusted Advisor, scanning for those checks that we determined. Anything that it identifies will then be filtered into Jira, where there's different tickets that are created, and then based on the findings, we have the severity level also that's being fed into that and assigned. Then that all information all goes into Brinka, where that will be rolled up to, we look at it in terms of teams, and assign them then an overall rating based on, again, the number of tickets and severity. This next slide is here is just an example of a JIRA ticket. So you can see the issue type here is cost optimization, underutilized EC2 instance. We have the component name or the resource ID that just kind of helps teams identify, okay, what resource that we really, that we're talking about. And again, priority, talk about the severity to give teams an idea of how to prioritize these issues. And then some simple other information like the account ID, because like I said, our teams have 2 accounts, prod and non-prod, so then they know which account to kind of go into. So we surface all this data, they get their rating. What's the next steps? So as far as remediating these issues, in the actual scorecard, we have a link to a wiki page or an information page that basically goes through and just explains all of our methodology. We also have in there steps and resources on how to actually optimize costs, and then just tips for being a little more proactive. The next big piece here is just exception handling. We know that there's going to be, that this will come up, for instance, like POC or disaster recovery. So we do have a process in place for that. And then if the appropriate action is taken, so if a team goes in, right sizes one of these resources, or decommissions it, whatever the appropriate action is, our scanner runs on a weekly basis. So in the following week, it won't be detected, and then that ticket will, or finding, I guess, issue will close. So some kind of results, feedback on phase 1. When we launched this in July, to date, we've had over 2,600 optimization findings or tickets that have been created. Of those, 1,600 of them have been remediated. One takeaway that we have from this is we don't have an easy way to really quantify that right now, so that will be something else, that, again, an enhancement or takeaway that we're working on to make sure that we have just an easy way to identify how much we actually saved by these efforts. As part of this kind of rollout, we also have set a goal, or I have set a goal, to make sure that all of our teams are at least a 3-star or above by the end of the year. And we're hoping that through this process, this will encourage teams to be a little more proactive on their cost optimization, both awareness and just making sure that they're taking that into consideration. Tracking on that, actually, to date, we're already up 7%. So teams, you can see there's some progress already being made, that their ratings are getting better. Then again, just key takeaways, I just kind of mentioned one of these, being able to easily quantify the savings from these remediations. And then another takeaway that we've kind of come is just incorporating materiality, and also maybe providing insights into the saving, like a dollar value on how much optimization potential is, to help teams really prioritize which tickets or issues that they should really focus on to get the most savings, and where they should put their time. That is all that I have. Is there any questions or feedback, recommendations?
So what was the biggest finding? Was it over-provisioning, or not right-sizing, or abandoned assets? What was the primary?
So that's the other piece too. It's another takeaway, is being able to easily surface that data. Right now, it would require me to go through all those tickets, and so I had to work with our cloud services, the actual owner of our scanning engine, who helped build this, to be able to easily pull that information. But a lot of it is just underutilized EC2 instances. It's the biggest driver.
Over-provisioning?
Yeah, basically, yeah. So, what type of reserved instances and how long the term? So we generally, at a corporate level, I will go in and do some analysis based on just general instances, so T2s, T3s. And I will make a purchase and kind of monitor that. Usually we'll do all up front, and then typically we've done 1 year for the most part. Yeah.
Sorry, we've gone 3 years, and I would highly recommend meet them with the state to minimize their instances before you go that route. It is very attractive because here it's to save 50% what you're talking about constant versus on plan, but you're not going to see. They're not even using that. It's unbelievable. It takes a lot of discipline to make. There's a tragedy of commons as you shift from on-prem into the cloud, because on-prem developers have no organizational responsibility to this, and once they go to the cloud, they do. There's a gap there that isn't being met. I don't know how you guys have really started doing that. We're trying to educate our developers around that, what the ownership is to that spend, and give them a blueprint to that. The other problem we have is we're a global organization, so we have, every time we go to a developer, he says, well, the guy in India is working on it too. Well, I can tell you, if I got a heat map for my cloud, that he's only worked on it 1 day in the last 60 days. So shut that thing down. Sorry.
No. Yep.
So Morningstar started as a fairly large, traditional, on-prem enterprise. Was the shift to cloud immediate? Was there sort of like a event or change in mindset that caused the jump, or is this just sort of a slow shift over time as more the technologies emerged?
There was no specific event. I think it was more of just exploring this and this new space and trying to get our feet wet with the cloud.
Have you found any issues in terms of organization, just psychologically, in terms of losing this ownership of their infrastructure, not having control? That seems to be something that runs into some other organizations that will get a strong engineering challenge, but it's the cultural challenge, cultural shift that's required to make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely, yes, I've definitely kind of seen that as a finance person myself, letting go and trusting, that the other teams are doing. I even struggle with it. So it's definitely, there's a lot of change. It's a huge operational change, and that's not easy. And I think, again, a lot of these foundational pieces, I know our governance process may not be as agile as it can be, but it is helping us at least make steps toward the right way, where we can kind of slowly, build trust. The teams are acting responsibly.
Everything is covered. Mr. Gentleman, doesn't matter if you choose accountability, choose somebody. Having a partner that's going to give you a visual map of what you're spending every single day. We had a problem where our storage gateways were replicating to Glacier, and it was an infinite loop as it replicated to Glacier. It wasn't the fact that it was we were storing that much. It was the put in the Glacier was costing us. It was costing us thousands. If we didn't have accountability, we showed us that on day one. We couldn't call AWS to say, hey, what's going on? So I'm just telling you right now, we need that visibility. With your monthly spend, you're going to get a bill that's going to kill you. Not because it is something that you're, it may be because it's something that one of your developers did, or maybe just something that Amazon didn't anticipate. And you're going to have to challenge them on it. And without the evidence that we have of accountability, we couldn't have done it.
There are other vendors than accountability.
Yes, there are thousands of
You
vendors.
can
I'm
also
sorry.
roll your own.
There are thousands of vendors.
Not to cut you off, but we will
Find
have more
somebody.
pizza
Partner
afterwards.
that you can trust.
There's more pizza and more discussion, so let's definitely bring up, are there other questions for Katelyn?
Yeah.
So my company currently, we've only got like like, it's something that I think about a lot, the cost, especially after the Christmas where I left on a bunch of servers and had a $3,000 bill. What would you recommend are some good, like, first steps to ensure that as we give, as I hope to pass that responsibility on to more engineers and give more engineers the capability to deploy stuff into the cloud on their own, what would you recommend are like good first steps for ensuring that they keep these things in mind?
Yes, great question. One of my favorite tools, I guess, are in AWS, specifically the Cost Explorer dashboard. It surprises me still that there's teams that don't know that that actually exists to their accounts, so I always love showing them that. They've kind of done some enhancements this year to it on, when you go to the actual dashboard, on the right-hand side, there's a trend analysis, so it'll just kind of highlight anything that it's shown. There's a lot of things that I've caught just by looking at that. Like
Building alarms, CloudWatch metrics. The building alarms can kick off and you don't really catch it very quickly. But various CloudWatch metrics and tying those to alarms. We've got several options in the toolkit.
If you're in a child account, don't get this
what was that?
if you're in a child account, get 0.
Yeah, I guess it does. Yeah, sorry. It does depend on what your permissions are. But again, yeah, I mean, even AWS has, we have a third-party cost management tool that we use that we have. I will send out a report for all the P&L and teams, just a weekly summary, and it just says, okay, you're projected to spend X amount, more than you did the prior month. So just, again, just keeping that information coming at them. And then, like they said, AWS, they have the budgets and threshold alerts. You can set alerts based on if spend changes for service or an account based on a certain amount. It's good stuff to get.
So we have more pizza, but we can't eat it in this room. So we have to go back to the auditorium where all the pizza is. The soda machine is kind of like around the corner. And I forgot to mention, ladies, if you need to use the restroom, we are locked out. So find Katelyn or myself or Leah. We can let you into the bathroom. If you need us, just find us. Yeah, thanks for coming. Oh, and slides and videos will be shared later.
Next meeting.
October 3rd, next meeting.